Today we're diving the Britannic. Absolute bucket list wreck. One I've been looking forward to for a very, very long time. I know it's going to be great, and I haven't even got in the water. Sweet.
My signal in 10 seconds. I will give you my signal, okay? So in 3, in 2, in 1, go!
I can't begin to tell you how excited I am at this particular moment of this dive. You can see there that I'm starting the descent onto the Britannic, one of the best known shipwrecks in the world. Certainly the largest, most intact shipwreck that can be dived without needing to be in a submersible or something like that. This is a wreck that is associated with some of the best known names in diving and technical diving. So all the way from Jacques Cousteau in the 1970s, Kevin Gurr in the 90s when it was, I guess, first dived in the modern era. People like Lee Bishop, John Chasterton, Richie Kohler, Evans Kovac, all those kind of people, absolute legends. I wouldn't put them myself in that category, of course, but today I'm going to join them in diving the Britannic. It's just incredibly exciting. You can see what's happened is that we've dived off the rib. We're using Kia divers on the island of Kia in Greece. They brought us out here on a pair of ribs. There was 4 divers in total plus some safety divers. Now, one of the interesting things about diving the Britannic is that it's mandatory to have a guide with you. So there's actually 3 of us as divers, and George, who is the guy you can see in the orange dry suit, he was our guide. With 4 of us on that rib, space was a bit tight, so the way that we managed that was to put 2 divers in first of all. That was George and Greg, and then the second pair of divers, which was Henry and myself, got in as quickly as we could afterwards. The first pair of divers waited on the line, as you've seen, and then when we joined them, you've seen already, George had a quick check, made sure everyone was okay, and then started the descent down to the wreck. I guess one of the other interesting things that you'll have probably noticed is that I've got 2 working video cameras on this dive. I've got my power lens on my helmet on the side of my head, and then I've got a GoPro mounted on the front of my scooter, and you saw me turning it on and moving my video lights out on the arms and everything ready for the dive. And what I'm going to do through the dive is I'm going to switch between the power lens and I'm going to and then occasionally show you some GoPro footage as well. So you can see there I've just switched to the GoPro footage. I think it'd be pretty obvious when that happens, because all of a sudden you won't see my hands, you won't see the front of the scooter, you won't see the video lights or anything like that. But I think what you'll probably do is get more of a feel for what's going on. The other thing, of course, to mention is I've got my Inspiration handset on the left hand side, and that will run all the way through, so you can see my PO2s, you can see the TTS, you can see the depth, you can see the dive time, all that kind of stuff. And I know loads of people are always interested in that, so hopefully it will give you the sense of what's happening with the dive. And as always, I just want to say thank you to Eric Stott, who is the man who created effectively the system for getting information from my handset into telemetry overlay and then putting it on the screen where you can see it. I'll put a link to all his gear, or to his channel rather, in the comments. So if you're interested in doing this yourself, that's how you can find out. The plan for this dive was to go and visit the stern, in particular the props, and you're going to see those a bit more later on. It's also, I think, an opportunity for George to have another look at us to have a look at the system and get ourselves familiar with it, because we're going to be doing a few more dives on the Britannic. And one of the things I think that's probably interesting to note at this point is how long the descent is taking us. In some of my other videos, you may have seen me scootering down as quickly as I possibly could to get to the wreck, whereas in this one, it's actually taking a reasonable amount of time. Now, I think that's just the way that George likes to do it. He's relatively concerned about oxygen spikes and those kind of things, which is absolutely right and proper. I think it's also part of his thing is just to allow people to not feel flustered. They can get down in their own time so that when they arrive at the wreck, they're not in a particularly bad way. So that makes a lot of sense. And as always, you know, when you're diving somewhere else and you're diving with someone else, it's important to understand their procedures and adapt to them. So that's what's going on. The other thing that you might have noticed is actually quite a lot of line in the water. And I think that's because one of the things that they have to do when they shot the wreck is have line for the seabed, which is about 120 meters. They probably have a bit more, so 130 meters of line, which is great if you miss the wreck. But if you hit the wreck, and as we'll see in this particular case, that's what's happened, the top of the wreck is 85, 90 meters. So you end up with 30 odd meters of spare line in the water. And that's another thing that's making this descent slow. We're not going vertically down, we're going down at an angle. So obviously the distance is much further, and therefore it's going to take you longer to get to the wreck. There's a few things that Britannic is very famous for. One is having unpredictable currents. So the wreck lies in the middle of a shipping channel, a really busy shipping channel, and the currents pick up and die down, you know, for reasons that nobody can completely predict. On this trip, we did 3 dives. 2 of them, we had really strong currents near the surface and nothing at the bottom. This one wasn't like that. We had a little bit or a bit of current on the bottom, but pretty much nothing on the deco. So that made it quite a nice introduction to the wreck. The other thing was the shipping, and it was emphasized over and over again to us that we couldn't drift. We couldn't do our decompression while we're drifting. And the whole setup for diving the Britannic is done in such a way so that divers stay on the shot line. Anybody who's seen any of my lazy shot videos, this is completely the opposite of that. We're going to stay on the shot line come what may. And the reason is basically because they're concerned that in this busy shipping channel, if you start drifting, there is a real risk of a big ship going through the top of the deco station, and obviously that would potentially kill all the divers that are decompressing there. When we go diving, Kia divers and the local controller of this area put a exclusion zone around the dive site so that ships know they have to go, move to the side of it. If we're drifting, and we're drifting at several knots, that isn't going to work, which is why the authorities, Kia divers, everybody is so concerned that we don't start drifting. And the whole decompression setup is designed to avoid that. I'm going to talk about it a bit more at the end of the video. And it's a really interesting system. I've never seen anything like it before. I was a little bit skeptical, or certainly interested to see how it was going to work. Actually, it worked really well. Didn't so much need it on this dive because there was very little current near the surface, but the 2 other dives that we did later on, and that I'm going to push videos out about later on, actually the current became really strong on the deco. George, who's done this wreck an awful lot of times, said, the current was strong, but he's actually experienced it much stronger than we had it. And if that's the case, then doing several hours of deco would be a particularly challenging experience. And I think possibly one of the reasons why Britannic is still considered to be such a challenging dive. 100 meters, 120 meters in fairly nice waters. Okay, it's a bit colder maybe than some of the other guys we're used to, but certainly this is warmer than I normally have. That aspect of it wasn't particularly challenging, but the bit near the surface, so the decompression, decompressing in strong currents and getting in and out of relatively small boats, not ones that are purpose designed for this sort of stuff, that for me certainly made the dive pretty challenging, and I don't think I was the only person who felt that way. The good news is, after that long descent, we have finally arrived at the wreck. It almost doesn't look like a wreck. It almost looks like a seabed, but you can see there is the kind of at the edge there. It's pretty difficult to describe how incredible this moment feels, because all of a sudden, in this one glimpse, as you can see here, you get the magnitude of the scale of this thing. I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to do much better than just say it is really, really big. In fact, it's so big it's almost difficult at this moment in time to believe that you're on a shipwreck. I mean, you can see there it disappearing off into the distance. There's George. You can see you probably saw the shot line sort of heading down to lie on the wreck, and it just seems to go on for absolute ever. All of us, I think, felt the same way, which is the challenge involved in describing something like this. You probably need to be a poet or a well-known author or something like that just to kind of explain exactly how big it is. I'm afraid I'm neither of those things. I'm just a diver. I'm also a diver, I think, who's realizing that he's got a problem with one of his video lights, which is a bit irritating. The one on the left, unfortunately, I don't think I managed to get it on, so you have to make do with one video light. The good news is, as you can see, there is so much ambient light down on this wreck that actually don't really need a video light, although it will be quite handy in a bit when I do some close-ups on some stuff. In sort of an effort to make up for that, you've probably seen that the torch on my left hand has also got a video light mode, so I'm going to be using that to illuminate it. As we go over the hull here, you can see a few things. One is there's the remains of some previous shot lines on the wreck. The other thing is starting to see portholes. And once you start seeing one porthole, you realise that they are everywhere, because, of course, this was a massive passenger ship, and all of these portholes would be to cabins or living spaces, something like that, because where we've landed is, I guess, maybe 25% further forward than the stern. So this is the back quarter of the ship that we're going to see. Just up to my left hand side here is the first class promenade deck, and our last dive of the trip we actually scooted all the way along there. It was probably the best of the 3 dives, but each of them was great in its own way, so I think it's going to be the video that I release last as well. So if you want to see that, you're going to have to hang on and watch a few of my other ones. The other thing to note as I go along the top of the promenade deck here is you look out to the left-hand side there, you can see the lifeboat davits. But just before we get to those, you've probably seen the plaque on the side there. That is the famous one left by Kevin Gurr to commemorate Jacques Cousteau. It was put there in 1997, so has been down there 29 years. And you have a look at it, it's really clean. Now, somebody may have come back and cleaned it since then. Anecdotally, I also gathered that it's fallen off that part and has been picked up and put back on there. But whatever has happened to it, it's in really good order and looks really nice. And I think importance that we as divers remember those milestones, remember those pioneers, frankly, both Jack and Kevin, because both of their achievements at the time, given the technology and everything, were incredible. You can probably see here that George is keeping us moving. He's the person who's monitoring the TTS on the dive. He's making sure that we all get back to the shot line and nobody overstays, that we've all got the right amount of deco, and if anything goes wrong, he's going to take care of us as well. So he's got a load of responsibility, which is why, as you can see here, he's just keeping an eye on everybody. So he just checks back to make sure that we're all following him. Now, the plan for this dive was to do what we're doing here, which is to drop down a bit further forward of the stern and then drop over the side and go to the props, which I'm going to do in a second. You can see there, that's Greg in front of me with his GBM generic breathing machine, front mounted, or chest mounted, I guess, rebreather. He's diving it in a side mount configuration. Henry has got the same rebreather, but he's diving it with a pair of twin 12 litres. And interesting talking to those two about the different strategies that they use and the way they configure them and all those kind of things. Really quite an eye-opener for me, because I'm much more used to people diving back mount rebreathers, chest mount lifeboats aren't something that are particularly big in the UK. So absolutely fascinating to see the way they use them. Also, they are manual CCRs, so they are maintaining the PO2 themselves. There's a needle valve, which is an adjustable valve that effectively allows a trickle of oxygen through the rebreather, and you can adjust that and depending on your own metabolic rate. Anyway, enough of that, because you can see just coming up through the gloom there, the first of the propellers. This is the port prop. So Britannic had 3 props. It had a 3-bladed one on the port and starboard, and you can see one of them here, and then a 4-bladed one just in front of the rudder, and we're going to see that in a minute as well. One of the things we wanted to do was get a photo of ourselves with the prop. So Greg and Henry are both IANTD instructors. They've got a flag with them. They wanted a photo with that by the props. And, frankly, why not? The only thing with doing something like that, of course, is that you have to talk about it and agree it before the dive, because if you try and do it underwater, it's just going to be an utter cluster. So we did that. The other issue with it is that it's also going to be slightly problematic, because it's, no matter how good you are and how efficient you are, it's going to use a relatively reasonable chunk of your bottom time. So what I'm doing here is I'm sat by the prop and I'm waiting for the guys to come up to me. Henry is going to give his GoPro to George. Greg, as you can see here, is and myself are both getting into position for the FOT. And once that transfer has happened, Henry's come over. We're going to get the picture all sorted. Not much really for me to do other than to wait here. The other interesting thing perhaps you can see is, just as I'm looking at it now, in the lower left, you can actually see the rudder. You can see the 4-bladed prop. Now, my understanding is that during the sinking, one of the famous things that happened, so nobody actually died on the wreck, but they let the lifeboats get away a bit early, and when that happened, 2 of the lifeboats were dragged into the propellers. Actually, this one, the port propeller, and they were pulled in, and really sadly 30 people died. It's not known exactly how many of them were in those lifeboats, whether some of the other ones were people who weren't in lifeboats or whatever, but yeah, 30 people really sadly died, and this prop that we're right next to was the cause probably of the majority of those. The other fascinating event associated with this prop is that there's a lady called Violet Jessop, who was one of the nurses on Britannic, and she was in one of those lifeboats, and as the lifeboat was being dragged towards the prop, she jumped overboard, and she later wrote in her memoirs that she was hit on the head by one of the blades of the prop. Now, she survived, and actually her story is incredible, but later on in life she discovered she had a skull fracture, or she'd had her skull fractured, and she always associated it with the impact from this prop, the port prop on Britannic. Her other claim to fame is that she was also on the Titanic when it sunk, and served aboard Olympic as well. So she has spent time on all 3 of those ships. And in fact, I think she was on Olympic when it collided with HMS Hawke as well. So I guess you could say she was a very lucky lady to survive all those 3 incidents and have fascinating stories. I guess the other option is to say that she was really unlucky, because she was always on ships when stuff happened to them. But she lived, I think, until the ripe old age of 83, died in 1971, interestingly enough, the year that I was born. And if you're interested in learning more about her, she wrote her memoirs, which is called Titanic Survivor, but also there's a whole load of stuff online about Violet Jessop, I think because of her link with those 3 incredible shipwrecks, the Titanic and the Britannic, but also her involvement with Olympic, which of course is the one that survived and had a long and fruitful life until it was scrapped, I think, in the 1930s. The good news is my discussion of Violet and the talk about the prop has allowed us to get through the taking of the photo. You can see George is handing the camera back over to Henry there. There's Greg. Unfortunately, photos aren't quite done because Henry also wanted a photo of himself or some video of himself by the prop. So that is the next item on my agenda to get that on. George, meanwhile, is keen to crack on. So you'll probably see him heading over to the left, but me and Henry are going to spend a couple of minutes trying to get a photo for him. While I'm kind of moving into position, if you have a look, this shot shows really well the prop, the four-bladed prop with the rudder below me there. I've just gone past it, and then I'm turning back and telling Henry that he needs to get in position for the photo. The other prop, the starboard one, is of course on the other side of the rudder, on the other side of the four-bladed prop. I didn't go down to it. It's one of those things. There's a whole load of stuff that I would quite like to do if I was to come back to Britannic, and one of the things is to go back and get right down to the bottom. So we never actually went down to the seabed on any of the 3 dives, and I think you could say, oh, you should have done that, and you're absolutely right. There's a whole load of stuff that we should have done, and I think that's probably something you're going to hear through all of my 3 videos. Me going, yeah, I'd like to come back and see some more of this, or I'd like to spend some more time here, or whatever. This shot, though, you can see that is the stern of the Britannic with obviously the prop going underneath it. I'm trying to encourage Henry to get around the other side of the prop and to shine his torch on it, because I think that will give us the best possible result. It's something he likes to do on shipwrecks is just to get his prop photo. So he's a guy who's done all the organising, put a huge amount of work in it, so I'm really keen to do that. Unfortunately, Greg has just kind of photo bombed us a bit there, but the good news is he's moved out of the way, and there you go. I think that's quite a nice bit showing Henry with the prop. You see, I've got my torch on it at the moment, but once I turn it off like that, I think that produces a really nice bit of video and a really nice image. And Henry's taken a couple of screenshots of these and run it through an AI thing, and it's absolutely sorted out the colours. So that worked really nice. He got his prop photo, and once again you can see here, looking down at the four-bladed prop with the rudder to the right hand side of it, you can see George is up there by the stern, wondering why we're not coming, why we're not getting on. But we've done the photos now, so that's really nice. And you can see there, I'm just getting down to get a bit of footage of that four-bladed prop. I've got my my torch on it there. There you go. I think that's really nice. Absolutely clearly see it. You can see the rudder, and looking up, you can see the counter stern there. Which, yeah, I've dived some big wrecks. I've seen some beautiful sterns on wrecks, and this really stands out in my memory because it's all there, it's all intact, it's never been salvaged, it's not collapsed in any way. It is the only thing that has changed really is it's got all this kind of marine growth on it, but other than that, it's not dissimilar to the day it went down. And it's a real privilege to dive a wreck that is intact and as big as this. I guess the thing is that at some point this is going to change. It is going to collapse. It's going to become very similar to all those other wrecks that I dive. But right now, it isn't. What you can see is I'm just coming round the side of the stern, and that's going to take me onto the rather epically named poop deck. One of the things that I asked before we did this dive was whether there are any sign of the bridge gear on the aft docking station. George wasn't 100% certain, so I tried to have a look, and you'll see me doing that as I go over here. So this is a kind of specialist part of the ship. So all the Olympic class ships had them. In fact, most big ships had them. So it was effectively a station that ran the width of the boat, the beam of the boat, and on there would be devices or controls that would assist with the docking, so telegraphs and helms and those kind of things. But I had a quick look. I couldn't see anything. That doesn't mean they're not there. Just means that I didn't see them, and none of the other guys saw anything as well. It's one of those, another one of those things. If I was to go back and I was going to spend more time in the stern, I would probably go down the bottom and then come up the aft docking station to try and see. I mean, another thing I would love to do. Oh man, how would I love to go inside the Britannic? And you can just see there is a large opening. It's one of a huge number that I saw during the dives, and they are so inviting. I would have loved to have gone inside them, laid some line, seen what I could see. Unfortunately, another one of the restrictions when you dive the Britannic, not only do you have to have a guide, not only are you not allowed to drift dive, but also you have to, or you're not allowed to penetrate unless you have absolutely specific clearance to do that. The only thing you can do is the promenade deck, which I'm going to do on one of the later dives. Now, what I'm showing here is one of the cranes on the stern. I think there was 4 in this kind of area. There's just one of them. Obviously, it's on the port side, and I guess they were probably used for loading cargo in and out. I'm not really sure. Hopefully somebody will watch this video and tell me what those are for. There's another one that we're going to see on the right in a minute. I think it's the nature of diving a wreck of this scale and at this depth is that your bottom time is so limited that you have to be really selective about what it is that you're going to see. And particularly for people like us who've never dived it before, we're just trying to get it into our heads, the layout of the wreck, what's there. This is the entrance to the promenade deck, and you can see there's an anchor there from a previous dive with a load of chain hanging down. So I guess at some point somebody should come and get that. But the reality is that our dive is nearly done. You're probably seeing my TTS there is getting close to 100 minutes. We're heading back along the outside of the promenade deck. The davits for the 2 or lifeboat davits that I mentioned earlier on are there. Obviously, one of the big improvements that was made to Britannic and Olympic after the Titanic disaster was that they all carried an awful lot more lifeboats. With the Britannic, they weren't actually needed because it only had about 1,000 people on board. Only 1,000 people. That's still a huge number, but far less than Titanic, which had, I think, 2,200, 2,300 people when it was on board. The Britannic was making its way back into, it was to pick up wounded, so all the people on board were medical personnel, ship's crew, those sorts of things. There weren't any wounded people on board, weren't any wounded soldiers. In fact, one of the reasons that it sank so quickly was that they had all the portholes and all the windows open because they were airing it all out, ready to take on more passengers. That's very sad, and I guess they should have known. They were in waters where submarines were known to operate. The Gala had been sunk a week before by a mine, although they did think it was a submarine. The fact is, it was a high threat environment, I guess, and maybe they should have been better prepared. Anyway, they weren't, and the good news for us is we get to enjoy this epic wreck. Although not get to enjoy the epic wreck anymore on this dive because, as you can see, George has taken us back to the shot line. One of the interesting things you might have seen when we put our strobes on, we were about 90-ish metres. Here we are at 84, no sign of the strobes. It's not until I look all the way up there you can see the strobes. So what's actually happened is the guys above, when they're setting up the deco station, there was a bit of, I think, wind or whatever, maybe a bit of current up shallower that has pulled the shot line up away from the bottom. So all our strobes have gone this much further up above the bottom. So when we were coming back to the shot, we couldn't actually see the strobes. It was only when I did what you saw me do there, which is to look up, that I actually saw them. And I think this confused us all quite a lot. It's like, where are our strobes? And one of the divers, I think George was telling him to go up, and it was like, well, where's my strobe? And then eventually George pointed up, and it's like, oh yeah, there it is. So it was a really slightly bizarre. I have had Similar things happen on other dives. I don't know, I guess I just wasn't expecting it on this one, but anyway, there you go. Now, the more eagle-eyed amongst you may have noticed that I've managed to switch from high set point to low set point. So my PO2 is dropping. I don't know how that happened. It must have been, I must have hit the middle button on my handset and held it, which is what you need to do to change the set point. But probably while I'm messing around with scooters and all those kind of things. But as I'm ascending now, you can probably see the PO2 is starting to drop. Well, it would drop anyway on an ascent because the pressure is reducing. But what should be happening is the solenoid is kicking in to maintain it at 1.3. Actually, because I've told the unit that the set point is 0.7, I didn't tell it deliberately, I told it by accident. So the PO2 is rising, the solenoid is not doing anything about that, and you can see that my PO2 is falling down and down. I'm slightly preoccupied, as you can see here. I am sorting out strobes, I'm putting everything away, so I simply haven't noticed that my PO2 is falling. There should have been a audio alarm, and there should have been a flashing HUD indicator as well. For whatever reason, I've missed both of those things. But you can see, I think now that I've picked it up, and I'm finally starting to do something about it. I've pressed and held the middle button, so the set point has gone back up to 1.3, and instantly the solenoid starts firing, starts chucking oxygen back in, and is starting to sort out the problem. You probably saw that my TTS went up to about 145 minutes. That was based on the PO2 as it was at that time, but because the solenoid is pushing the PO2 back up again, that is dropping the TTS, and that's good news because I'd much prefer to do, as I've got here, 112 minutes of decompression rather than 145 that I would have had to do with that low PO2. The other thing to talk about is the relatively short runtime. So the total runtime is going to be just over 2 hours for this dive. You might say, well, actually, you know, why aren't you doing nearly 3 or 2.5 or whatever? And the reason is because we weren't entirely concerned about how everybody would cope with the water temperature. A couple of the other dives were finding it quite cold on some of the warm-up dives. So even though they've got additional layers on and they've got heating systems on and all those sorts of things, they were still finding it relatively cold. And clearly being cold during decompression is a really bad thing. It's not only is it uncomfortable, but you actually off-gas much less well when you are cold. So it's actually really good safety reasons for being warm. The other thing that's going on at the moment is you can probably see I'm putting my PO2 up to 1.5. I've done that on the handset on my inspiration. I've just done it on my shear water, so they're both tracking each other. And once again, you can see that's probably accelerating the deco like that has knocked off about 10 minutes off my TTS, which once again is really welcome. The other guys were doing similar things on their rebreathers. Clearly no set point on a manual CCR, so they were making it happen manually. George down below on his Liberty, he can do the same as me. He, interestingly enough, runs slightly more conservative gradient factors than any of us were running, and therefore that's why I think if you have a look, you can every now and again you can see him further down. There you go, see him further down the line than me. Now the other thing I said I'd talk about is the deco trapeze. I'm going to show you it in a bit, but the first thing to kind of note is that the bottom of the system looks a lot like a lazy shot. So you've got the main shot line that goes down to the wreck. Then in their system here, they have about a 20-meter line that comes off, and that's typically where you would normally, on a drifting lazy shot, you would have your tags. In this case, what they have is a 50% nitrox cylinder. You can just see that underneath the diver, and there's a weight there as well just to keep the whole thing held down. What there is above that is something that looks well, it's a triangle. The triangle is made up of 2 ropes that come out at about 45 degrees from the main shot line, and then in between those is a scaffolding bar, so your classic decompression trapeze. To keep the scaffolding bar in position, the lazy shot, so the rope that we're looking at the moment, is attached to the middle of it, and there are also 2 ropes that hang vertically down with chains on. There's also 2 buoys on the surface that are attached to each end of the scaffolding bar, and you can see here, this is I'm on the actual shot line looking back. You can see the scaffolding bar, you can see the 2 ropes that form the triangle, you can see the 2 ropes that go up there that are going to the buoys, and then hanging below those are the 2 ropes that have got the chain on. There's also the rope that the diver's holding on, which is just there to deal with a lot of current. But so I'm going to cover this system in a bit more detail in another video. I don't have particularly great footage of it from this one, but just to give you a feel. And that whole thing is there just to make sure that the divers can decompress in the currents without drifting. But for me, my dive is over. As you can see, I've cleared all my decompression. I've got up to the surface. It's a beautiful day. There's 2 boats there waiting to pick us up. The one there with all the guys on is waving to me and telling me that's where I need to go. So I'm going to let go of the station. There's a bit of current, not too much, but a little bit. I'm going to start to drift backwards towards the boat. And as always, at the end of any dive, obviously looking forward to getting back on the boat and really sharing the story of what we've just had, and kind of trying to take it all in, because it's been an absolutely incredible experience. You can see there George on the boat. He got some video footage of me, and I'm sure you can see there that I am looking absolutely chuffed to bits.
How was it, mate?
Oh man, pretty special.
We do it there, eh?
Yeah, that was absolutely incredible. And when people say it's a big fucking shipwreck, you know what? It's a big fucking shipwreck.
There you go. That's the Britannic. All done. Time to head back.